afternoon. Welcome to EdSet Network. Friend, as you know, today we are going to have discussion on gender issue, but we will have a discussion little bit different from the general discussion. We talk about the women facing problem and etc. and what are their demands. We would like to know the gender issue in the perspective of Indian tradition and how it has been talked about in different Indian texts, starting from the Indian ancient to the modern times, and we'll try to look at the Indian philosophical position on women and gender issues. So, on your behalf, I welcome Dr. Eman Thakur. He teaches political science in Jawaharlal Nehru University and have keen interest on these issues, and have also seen how this issue been addressed by the different intellectuals over the years. So, on your behalf, I welcome Dr. Thakur for a set lecture on the topic gender issue. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Amranji. I think what I'll do is one that yes, the problems that women are facing today. There are many problems, and people must have been talking about that. My central concern would be to think of a perspective on gender issue. Think of a perspective, because I think if we don't see this issue in a proper perspective, there is a possibility that we will not be able to arrive on very liberative discourse on gender politics or gender issues. I have a feeling that the way the gender issue is being perceived today globally, it is based on the Western philosophical tradition. Now, the Western philosophical tradition, even if we don't take it as a monolithic whole, I guess there are many problems in them. A problem due to the basic perception of human beings itself. There has been a big problem in the West, also in the East, everywhere. I think the marginalization of gender is almost a global issue. Marginalization of women is almost a global issue. But probably, I think there has to be a difference of opinion as far as East and West is concerned. Or let us explore it, and while exploring, I will not go too much into the Western tradition or Western philosophical tradition, contemporary Western thinkers on gender issues, because a lot of people keep talking about. I want to explore what has been the position of women in Indian tradition, and how the Indian intellectual tradition looks at the gender issue. We all know today that a lot of hue and cry is being made about the gender issue today, and we are trying to give priority to the issues of reservation for women in different political institutions. We have done that too. In many of the states, if we look at in most of the states, if we look at the Panchayati Raj system, we have given quite a bit of reservation. It's almost 50%. Parliament is debating about possibility of reservation in the parliament. India is one of those few countries where the Prime Minister was women quite for some time, and also the President of India is women at the moment. There is a lack of participation of women in the political process even now, despite the fact that we had Prime Minister of India, and it seems that broadly speaking, women are held within the household affairs, and if we look at it in the public sphere, women are there, but mostly, if you argue that they are mostly in the tertiary sector, one would not deny that. There is a gender imbalance as far as the public sphere is concerned. But even then, I think one would suggest that the family relations and the position of women in India has been quite different than the West. I am saying different, if not superior or inferior. I think it has been different than the West, and we have to understand that difference and the reason of the difference. And therefore, I suggest that we have to get into the collective consciousness of Indian society, and we have to see how women perceive themselves, and how do they look at themselves, and what does liberation mean for them. I think there is a possibility that we will formulate a concept of liberation based on the Western tradition, which may not be acceptable to a large number of women in India. Yes, there is an elite, English speaking elite women in India who conceptualize about themselves exactly in the way the Western feminist movement is conceptualizing itself, but possibly that conceptualization is not being shared by a large number of women, and therefore what happens is that there are two kind of people among them, one who would be exactly following the Western pattern, and the other who would be completely out from this kind of movement for equality and all. I think if at all there is a possibility of inclusion of larger sections of Indian society, including all caste communities, in the process of liberation, struggle for liberation for women, we need to map the collective consciousness of women. And of course, religion is an important issue in that. How the Muslim women or the Hindu women look at things for themselves, and that would be very important. But I will not talk about the Muslim women too much because I don't know about them too much, and also the philosophy that they have. But I can say that there are researches going on to suggest that in the Muslim tradition, women were never marginalized as they are marginalized now. There is a patriarchy operating in the Muslim community, but that patriarchy is a product of a particular phase in the history of Muslim society. It is not a product, it doesn't have a philosophical basis in the Muslim society. Maybe there are other reasons also, that there has been expansion of Islam in different worlds, and the expansion has never been smooth. So there is a possibility that they acquired certain kind of places for, they reserved certain kind of places for women, which is not considered to be very liberative, and practices grew in Muslim society which marginalized them. There is a book which is generally being very popular in the Muslim community, and I am told that every woman, when they get married, this book is given part of a gift from the family, called Vahiste Zevar. Now this book is very interesting, which talks about how they should behave. When I talk to the Muslim feminists, they say that this is a very humiliating book, but Muslim scholars suggest that the book was written in a particular phase in India when there was nothing available to discuss about their own problems. So at least this book is something which talks about their life, the problems, the health problems they face, and how they can manage that. So that is a matter of debate. I will not get into that too much. But what I'm interested in is that the Indian philosophy, and which people call also Hindu philosophy. I don't call it Hindu philosophy as such, but there is one trend. This is one of the trends in Indian tradition, apart from the Islamic trend. So how do they look at the gender issue in that? I have not come across any major text suggesting about the issue of gender in the Indian tradition, but one can easily locate the things by getting into the general discussion on Indian philosophy. I think it is widely accepted, very widely accepted, that the classical Indian tradition, the Vedic tradition, does not discriminate between male and female. The classical Vedic tradition, it is said that women are supposed to be equivalent to male. It is acceptable. It is not very difficult to accept, as if because I think they used to participate not only in rituals equally, but they were also participants in the political institutions. The ancient Indian political institutions, it is said that, were equally participated by male and female. And then we have certain examples, and I don't know how much these examples can be generalized, but that at least makes this point that women were not at the margins of philosophical thinking, though it is also true that most of the philosophers now we know they are males, but there is a possibility to argue that the domain of philosophy was not unrepresented by female. I'll take few examples to suggest that. And once again, let me warn that I don't know to what extent they can be generalized. We have never collected any data on this, and we have never tried to examine on this. But one can easily suggest that, well, maybe the written texts are not there by them, because the written texts were product of mutual interaction. And in any case, in Indian tradition, the name of the author on the text were not very important. I think these were the texts in traditions, and the authorship was not something that people would claim so much. So what they used to do was they would accumulate things available and put that as manuscript, and that was manuscript of the tradition. So it was basically the dominance of the tradition, in the sense that the group of thinkers, the community that would think in the same way would collect several kinds of texts, and many people would contribute in that. Sometimes those contributions are acknowledged, sometimes they are not, but the way we think of authorship today, it was not there earlier. Many of the texts are actually products of debates. So obviously, when you are debating and writing, or debate is documented, then the authorship is not very important. Who is the author? Very difficult to say, because one person is of course documenting, or it is known by his name, but then everybody who is participant in the debate can be considered as author of that. So let me put a couple of examples of this kind. One big example is that of Yagyalk. Yagyalk is one of the most known philosophers of ancient India, whose Yagyalk Smriti is very famous. He wrote a couple of Smritis, and he is one of those who actually worked out the social laws for Hinduism. The text that he has produced has 3 sections. Section 1 is about the rules that you frame. The section 2 is about the punishments for the rules, and section 3 is about how one can get rid of the guilt that one takes on oneself due to mistakes that one commits. So there are interesting things in those texts, but why I'm saying it is so important is because there is a commentary on this text by Mitakshara. There is a Mitakshara commentary on that, and Mitakshara, there are 2 commentaries in fact. One is a Mitakshara commentary, other is Daibhag commentary. Now these 2 commentaries are taken by the modern Indian state as a source of Indian law. So even today, in the Hindu families, the rules and regulations that control their everyday life is guided by the Mitakshara law. The inheritance of property, the question of ownership, all these things are actually addressed by more or less by this kind of these 2 interpretations of Yagyalk Smriti. Now, what is Yagyalk's position on women? I think it's very interesting to look at this Smriti, because in that he gives lot of rights to women, and definitely he gives property right to them. And he very simply says that if there is a widow will have right on property. Daughters will have rights on property. So it's very radical to talk at that time that women should have right to property. But the example that I have in mind is much more than that. I'm hinting towards the relation between Yagyalk and his wife, Gargi. So Yagyalk had 2 wives. One was quite philosophical, Gargi, and other was one who was more or less not intellectually very involved, and she was having a normal, simple life. Now, when Yagyalk decides that he should go on to the next stage of his life, that is vanaprasth. that he would now leave the family and go to the jungle and stay there. And Vanprastha is a stage of life where you go there and then you break your relations with your relatives, in the sense that you are not no more the householder. So you start thinking for the human being, for universe and all. You elevate your position in society and you come out from the social rules and regulations. So this is basically when you try to become much wiser, and you raise your consciousness to the higher level, and then you think that you are actually closer to moksha. Now, when he declares this, his wife Gargi asked him that, what are you doing? He said that I have to go for this because I think that I have now crossed that phase when I was a sannyasi or I was a householder. Now I have to move on to the next stage. So what I'm doing is that I'm going to divide my property, whatever I have, into two sections. So part will go to you and part will go to the other wife. Now Gargi raises this question that, do you think that any amount of property that you will give to me will liberate me? And there's a debate between the two. It's very, very important debate, very interesting debate. And the debate is such that then Yagyavalkya suggests that no amount of the property will liberate you. The real liberation will come only with realization of the self. Then she asks, don't you think that I also have right to realize myself? Yagyavalkya says every human being has right to realize his or her self, and you are equally capable of realizing yourself. Then the debate goes on, what does it mean to realize the self and how to realize the self and all those things, and there is a big debate in that. So this is something that is very, very interesting to see how one of the important discourses of Indian tradition, that is Yagyavalkya Maitri Yagyavalkya Gargi discourse, is about the self, and when it and the gender issue is only in the beginning, and it is suggesting that they are not different. The human beings are not different due to gender. I'll show you in how later on also this issue kept coming repeatedly, that the consciousness, at the level of the consciousness, male and female are same. They are not different. It's only at the level of the body, which is a very, very elementary level, that they are different. But when it comes to the attributes of human being, they are same in both of them. Maybe a little bit of difference is there due to the kind of physical composition and the kind of task that the body has to perform in the nature. But broadly speaking, there is hardly any difference. Why I am saying this? Because Western philosophy and Western tradition of feminism actually harp on this difference quite a bit. But there is a stream in the West also which suggests that gender is a social construct. I think Indian philosophy does suggest that this kind of gender discrimination is only a social construct. It is not a biological construct. It is not actually natural. So this is one example that I gave you. The second example is again very interesting to show how the gender role, the normally understood gender role was not there, and how they might have contributed in the growth of philosophy. And one knows that once you know the text, you also know the wife's name of the author. So it seems that since there was no issue of copyright, there was another mode of thinking about the text. The other example is that of Gautam. Gautam was again a very, very famous thinker, one of the famous thinkers, who has probably wrote a whole text on Nyaya. Nyaya is one of the philosophical traditions in India which has talked about the logic. It's an Indian logic actually. And nowadays, a lot of people are getting interested in the Indian logic worldwide. Even in Oxford, I'm told there's a course initiated on Indian logic. There are many books coming up in last 10 years. They have come up in last 10 years on Indian logic. So Indian logic is catching imagination in a big way. Not only this, I think that in Germany, 19th century Germany, Indian logic was one of the popular discourses that was being discussed there. So the story goes like this, that Gautam was teaching to his students, and this is a story of 6th century BC. So Gautam was teaching to his students about logic, and he was saying that whenever there is a fire, there is smoke. So if you see smoke somewhere, you can conclude that there is fire there. And that is a normal syllogism, which you call Aristotelian syllogism. Aristotle also says the same thing. So this is called three-stage logic. Now Gautam's wife comes from within, and she brings a pot, a mud pot, and breaks the mud pot in front of Gautam, and fume spread everywhere. She brought fume from the kitchen and broke that thing there. Now then she asked, here is the smoke, where is the fire? And that was a very, very valid question, and that forced Gautam to modify his model of logic, and he introduced 5-stage logic. The 5-stage logic suggests that if there is a fire, then there will be smoke. So wherever you see smoke, you must guess that there will be fire. There is a probability that there will be fire, but you can't be sure about it. So you go there and look for evidence for that. So you collect empirical evidence from there and say that, look, I've collected empirical evidence, therefore there is fire. So this is a 5-stage logic. Now you have 2 stages added. One is that you go empirically test it and then confirm that. So one can see that the construction of knowledge was not only done by males. There were free and frank interaction between genders on the idea of knowledge. You have many such examples all over where such kind of interactions have taken place and knowledge has been produced. But there is two interesting things that I want to suggest about this. One is that, the Sankhya tradition. The Sankhya tradition talks about Purush and Prakriti. Now, there is a confusion that the Purush is a male and the Prakriti is a female. It's not that. These are two symbols actually. But of course, Prakriti has a feminine character in the sense that Prakriti produces, and the Purush is one who conceptualizes things. So when you talk of Purush, it is not the male, it is both male and female. Everybody, human being actually, the conscious human being and the material world. These are two segments that we think of. But most interesting part of Indian philosophy, where you can look at the gender relationship, is the Tantric philosophy. The Tantric philosophy has very interesting arguments on this. It doesn't treat human beings as different. Both male and female it treats as the same as far as the consciousness is concerned. The body, of course, the initial body is different, and this initial body, the sexuality, the sexual difference between the two, the difference in the organ between the two, has been created for self-realization. That's what Tantric philosophy thinks. And then you can go through that engagement, the sexual engagement, to arrive on a stage of consciousness when you transcend the consciousness of the body and become conscious of the self and the consciousness of the universe. Now this is something where both of them can arrive, and both of them have equal right to arrive there. In fact, you cannot arrive there without the other. That's the most interesting part, that since the sex is something through which you can realize yourself, therefore you have to engage with the other means either male or female, in order to realize yourself. Your self-realization is dependent on your partner and the engagement with the bodily engagement with the partner. which means that you are actually you are one. So male and female together become one, and therefore you will see that in the Tantric tradition, both male and female dress in the same way. So male also dress in the feminine way. They wear sari and they put tikka and everything. You have many people from this tradition, like even Sri Ravi Shankar almost belongs to this tradition. So you will find that they are in this way. So this is very interesting, because unlike the discourse in the West, where first they are dichotomically understood opposite to each other, there's a dichotomous relationship between the two, and then they try to argue about things. So that becomes the feminism becomes an anti-male perspective. Patriarchy is constructed. Patriarchy is an idea where female is subordinated, and feminism is grounded to attack that. In the Indian tradition, I think, as the Tantric tradition would suggest, that this kind of differentiation, this kind of dichotomous relationship is not acceptable. It is not really, or it's not the real relationship. The relationship should be in a way that they are not only equal, but they exist for each other. When they come together, generally you have a complete thing in front of you. The complete existence is possible only when male and female come together. So you see that in the Indian tradition, I don't know that I don't know if I have made this point very clear, but at least what I want to assert is the point I want to bring home is that it seems to me that Indian tradition has looked at the gender relationship very differently. It doesn't pose one against the other. Instead, I think it looks at this relationship as a complementary relationship, and it is an existence where both of them can not only survive together, but both of them can give meaning to each other. That's the point, that both of them can give meaning to each other. Now let me jump from there to in the Indian national movement. I could have discussed in between the Islamic tradition, but as I said that today I don't want to get into it. I think Islamic tradition is also very rich, and if you look at the Sufi tradition particularly, there it's always the Sufi saint is always talking about the other is the feminine, and feminine is the God. It's always a kind of love poetry about the God. And the Sufi saints were not only males, Sufi saints were also many females. In fact, if you look at Dada Shikoh's books, he has given a list of the female Sufi saints, and his own sister was considered to be a great Sufi saint. So there also you will find that they do not really fix on the body. The body difference between male and female is considered to be a difference only in order to fulfill each other. It's a complementary difference. It is not a difference which is opposite to each other. The difference is complementary. But I'm not going to discuss in detail about the medieval period and the thinkers, from Islamic thinkers. But I'm sure that if one wants to find out, it is possible to argue in the same way that this kind of tradition was not differentiating male and female in a way it is being done by the modern Western philosophy. Let's look at the Indian national movement. Indian national movement, I'm suggesting it's very important because this is a time when our thinkers started looking back at history and looking back at the history of ideas and started analyzing them for themselves. And this analysis was not merely an assertion of identity, as generally people think, that they wanted to go back to the tradition so that they can assert their identity, which may be a part of the reason. But the most interesting thing is that they went back to that and wanted to look at the resources. They took tradition as resources for social change. Of course, initial thinkers like Ram Mohan Roy and others, they realized what was happening to women was not something great. So he went into the text and proved that sati and no marriages for widows and child marriage, all these things are not acceptable textually. He has proved that, but that was a very initial phase of that, when they did not really bring out much from the text. They basically tried to superimpose the Western tradition on the Eastern tradition, and trying to find out the resources in Indian tradition to suggest that what the West is bringing for us is also available in the Indian tradition, which is possible. But I think things were much more serious than what Ram Mohan and others did. If you look at the other generation of thinkers like Gandhi, Ambedkar, and Aurobindo, and Phule, and Pandita Ramabai, then you find things are very different, because these people were, by now it was established that what was happening to women in that period was not according to the Shastras. At the same time, they also tried to argue that what was being imposed by the Western tradition was also not correct. The West itself has no liberation of women, whereas our own tradition has much more liberation of women. So they were now trying to see how to re-articulate a new theory of feminism, and I think that is what I call a creative theory. These were the creative theories. This was the creative phase of Indian society, when people started examining the established traditions and started that for the purpose of transforming that into something else. The search of a new society began at that time. So they were extremely creative in thinking and rethinking about this. So look at Gandhi to start with. Gandhi probably was one of those thinkers who always thought that male and female are equal. Of course, Gandhi's family relation, if you look at his personal relationship, and it's important to see his personal relationship, because he said that my life is my message. So in that one finds instances of what you call some kind of authoritarian relationship with his wife, but that is episodic. That is very, very a small portion of the whole life, the way he lived with his wife, and I think it was quite a democratic relationship. And he always treated body as a site of experiment. So he experimented also with his sexuality, and of course, his wife was giving permission to him for all those things. So it seems that Gandhi, and then Gandhi looked at the gender issue in a very, very interesting way, and he always mobilized them to come out from the houses, participate come out from homes and participate in the national movement. It's in the Gandhian phase when large number of women came out from their households and became politically very active. They started thinking afresh, they started writing afresh, and you see a new energy was unleashed due to that. Then you have Ambedkar, who again is very, very, very interesting, because Ambedkar suggests that women have to be liberated, and their liberation is a guarantee of liberation of society. Their education is very important. He also kind of argued for active political participation of women in society. You have Aurobindo, who, like anybody else, thought that there is no difference between male and female as far as the consciousness is concerned. The minor body differences are not very important, not very significant. You have Tagore, whose writings are extremely interesting as far as gender issue is concerned, where he has always projected women as a thinking being, and at times much more powerful thinkers than the male themselves. So it is not surprising if the whole of the modern Indian thinking, if you look at it carefully, you will find that there is a kind of new articulation about gender relationship available there. You have Pandita Ramabai, Sarojini Naidu, many of them who have critiqued the traditional relationship, explored the possibility of gender autonomy, and explored the possibility of creatively thinking about gender relationship. The difference between this and the feminists in the West is, as I said earlier, and that is the point of investigation, is that probably these thinkers never thought that the feminist issues have to be projected against the males. It is against the patriarchy, but not against the males. So it's not an exclusive discourse. It was never thought that only women can talk about women and males cannot talk about women. I think it's very specific characteristic of the Indian thinking, where the liberation of women is directly linked with the liberation of the male too. It's not that their issues were separated from the general issues of liberation. Let me put it like this. Their issues of liberation were never separated from the general issues of liberation. It's possible that the social condition of that time was such that there was a need of radical engagement with this issue. It's possible, but I do not think that that such kind of segregation and such kind of exclusivity of the gender issue was ever existent any time. Now, if you come from there to Hindi literature, where I think a lot of things have been articulated, and political theorists and political scientists should actually work on the resources given by or provided by the Hindi writers, where you will find a lot of interesting articulations done by many people. And you take the great Premchand, right from Premchand to even the contemporary writers, you will find that most of them have emphasized on this point that the gender relationship, the relationship of the equality among the genders is extremely important. And in doing this, what you need to understand is the psychological dimensions and the dimensions of emotions, karuna, feelings, moh, and all those things have to understand. Let's take an example of Premchand. Premchand's Godan, the wife of Hori is extremely, Dhanya is extremely powerful, and at times you find that in such a situation which of acute poverty, when Hori takes certain decisions, Dhanya is equally participant in that, and not only that, Dhanya always controls Hori's thinking, and Dhanya is very practical. Dhanya is very pragmatic, and she keeps telling Hori what is right, what is wrong, and her if you just examine Dhanya's behavior, you will find that she represents a typical village woman who is not silent, who is not a silent observer. She is not passive listener. She has her opinion, and that opinion is always reflected, and that opinion always controls the behavior of the males. It is not that she doesn't control the behaviors of the male. There is a kind of mutual trust. There is a kind of mutual relationship. There is a kind of fulfilling relationship that you find among them. You have another novel, Gaban or Premashram or all this, in which you find the female character is very strong. At times she is stronger than the male actually. Male character tries to project himself as a great thinker, but when it comes to crucial moments, the woman actually goes ahead. Actually, she takes up the lead, and she actually not only takes up the lead but guides the male also what is to be done, and yet she remains very firm on her grounds in the household. She doesn't abandon the control of the household, but she also doesn't leave the philosophical aspect untouched. So this is a very interesting character where you want to maintain the domain that you think is your domain. At the same time, you intervene in others' domain. So the conclusion is that domains are not separate. It may be a temporary division of labor according to the mode of production, according to the new situation, but even in that mode of production, you never find that it is so typical that the other is not respected. I think in this, there is a relationship which is very different than a relationship that poses one against the other. You have writings of Jayasankar Prasad, and a very famous play by Jayasankar Prasad called Dhruv Swamini. Now, Dhruv Swamini is a play in which the main character is Dhruv Swamini, the main female character, very powerful character, and she actually is not merely a feminist, but also a powerful thinker. She is not merely a feminist thinker, but she reflects on many general things. I mean to say that she doesn't only talk of the gender equality. She is a powerful thinker by her own rights. You have Prasad's other writings, like take Kankal. Now, Kankal is a very interesting writing where many kinds of relationships are there, and where you see that yes, he has critically examined the situation of women in Indian society, which gives you a mixed feeling. Now, there is a character in that who got married to a big landlord, but she had her childhood friend who suddenly became a sannyasi, and they met after a long time, and then the earlier friendship was revived, and it got converted into an affair, and she used to go to Haridwar, stay with that male. Not only that, she had a child from that male, and that child was not only accepted in the family, was accepted socially also. Now, this is very interesting to see that how Prasad is writing in 40s, and at that time in this elite family, so there is this landlord family, this is acceptable. In fact, the husband also knew that she has a child from this man, and it was acceptable to them. So this kind of liberal attitude towards women is quite interesting to see. Of course, many of them faced a lot of problems in that. Many of the women characters faced a lot of problems in that, but towards the end of it, if you look at the female characters in the text, you will find that most of them are quite philosophical, and most of them have always controlled the male's behavior, in the sense that they have guided male's behavior and in the right direction. It's not women are not seen as passionate, as selfish, as which is generally assumed that the patriarchy projects women like that. I don't think that they were projected like that. They are very rational. They are much more creative, and they examine every relationship in a particular way, and they are very critical to males' attitude towards their body, but at the same time they have very well defined democratic arguments for having an adequate relationship. So there is a whole series of female character in this, which you will find is very much different than the stereotypical character that is talked about when we talk about Indian tradition. You have writings of Nirala, Surjkant Tripathi Nirala, very interesting writings, and when he writes about his own daughter who passed away, and he writes a tribute to his daughter, you see that he is also trying to explain her body, and it is such a pure explanation, pure documentation of the kind of beauty of the body. It's interesting to see the way Nirala describes that pure description, a description of the beauty by a father of the body of his daughter, is something which establishes this fact that they look at the gender relationship in not very patriarchal way. You have writings by Mahadevi Verma, women thinker and writer, who decided not to marry, and she picked up one of the first feminist writers in India. Her book called Srinkhala Ki Kadiyan. If you look at her writings, they are very interesting. She writes an essay on women in the West, or the Indian women who are influenced by the Western philosophy or Western tradition. And she gives a big critique of that. She says that what you are doing is you are losing your autonomy. You are guided by a philosophy which doesn't really allow you to realize yourself. If you have to assert, yes, we have to assert against the male dominance, no doubt about it, whatever is existing in society, but the tradition gives you such a powerful philosophy that you can easily do that. So you have her writings, her poetry, which has projected the problems of women in a big way. But these problems are not only material problems. These problems are not of the autonomy in the sense of being anarchic. It is about a philosophical struggle to assert that their philosophy is extremely powerful. They hold much more powerful mind to think, and which is acceptable. Which is not that it is not acceptable. Which has been acceptable to Indian society. You have thinkers like and writers like Shivani. You have thinkers and writers like Amrita Pritam from Punjab. They have also reflected on this, and their relationship, their personal life has been very different, and they are very widely accepted in the Indian community, and their writings are widely read. And in those writings, they have raised the issue of the female body. They have raised the issue of the autonomy of the thinking and the patriarchal relationship. I think that if you look at this whole range of issues that I have spoken, it seems to me that there is a coherent whole. There is a tradition of thinking about women. There is a tradition of thinking on the gender issues, which is very different than what is being done in the West. When I'm saying different, I'm just suggesting that difference should be acknowledged. I'm not saying that the difference is such that East is East and the West is West. That's Rudyard Kipling's famous statement. I'm not saying that. I think what I'm saying is that we have to acknowledge the cultural difference in thinking. The cultural difference is something which is existing, and if we take cognizance of that, probably we can think of reconstituting the universal. The universal that has been constituted by the West is not a correct universal. It is a universal which was constructed under the dominance of modernity and colonialism. And the fact in these societies and other societies may not be the same. And the way the modern world has assumed about many things, many questions, they think that they have settled those questions. There is a need to reopen those questions. And therefore, what I am suggesting is that reopen some of these questions, think on those lines, that how, or let me put it like this, has there been a continuity in thinking in Indian society on these issues or not? And my assertion would be that there is a continuity. There is a big continuity right from Yagyavalk to Shivani. And this continuity, I think, comes from the perspective that gender issue has raised, and the perspective that is available in the collective consciousness on these issues. So without conceptualizing them properly, if you think that you will be able to solve the problems that women are facing today, I think that might be a big problem. So therefore, this cultural difference should be taken cognizance of, and then that should be made grounds for exploring the problems of women of today's India. It is not the problem of only few percent of women who are Western educated and living in the cities, but if you think of the problems of women in India, there is a much bigger problem. Thank you.
So, how the present education system has have impact on the gender bias, you can say, the thinking of gender? Because these classical texts, what you see from the Jagvalakya to Shivani, very few of them even think of reading them. They just go by the what is being talked about through the newspaper and the media discussions. So, do you feel that there is a lack of perspective while raising people who are raising these issues?
I think there is a need of engagement with Indian collective consciousness. I think that because one of the problems with Indian education system by and large has been that we are disarticulated, we are disconnected from our own tradition. Now the problem is that our people are thinking in one way and Indian intelligentsia is thinking in another way. Therefore, at times what we think, we find our people are completely opposed to that.
Okay.
Take many examples. Take many examples where we think in one way and our people think very differently. Right from the whole issue of corruption to the issue of what you call bringing foreign money. The intellectuals and the policymakers and the people are thinking very differently. So it seems that somewhere the thinkers of India's contemporary periods are not connected with the thinking of the people, as Gandhi took extra effort to do that. Gandhi traveled through the country, spoke to the people, and kept his house open for the people. In fact, he lived in the ashram so that he could understand the consciousness of the people, what people were thinking at that time.
So this gap could be bridged through on following the Gandhi line.
I think universities should be open not merely for what you call intellectuals. One of the important roles of universities is that it should engage with the people at large. So professors should be told to take trips of the countryside. They should be provided some money and time, and they should be forced to take trips to the people and meet people in general. Otherwise, what's happening is we are so segregated that we don't even know what the people are thinking.
Okay. So, well, friends, with these words, we would like to conclude our lecture. I thank all of you for watching the lecture. On your behalf, I thank Dr. M. N. Thakur for giving such an insightful lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you.